The two pink lines stared back at me, stark and unforgiving against the white plastic. They weren't a maybe. They weren't a mistake. They were a death sentence. My hand trembled, the pregnancy test clattering against the cracked porcelain of my sink. Outside, the sounds of my pack, the distant laughter of pups, the low murmur of warriors training, felt like they were from another world. My world had just shrunk to the size of this tiny, cramped bathroom and the two lines that sealed my fate. I am Alara, an Omega of the Blackwood Creek Pack. In our world, that's just one step above being a stray. We are the nurturers, the peacekeepers, the ones who smooth over the ruffled fur of the higher ranks. We are not meant to be noticed, and we are certainly not meant to carry the airs of alphas. Especially not an alpha who doesn't even know my name. A wave of nausea, sharp and bitter, rolled through me, but it had nothing to do with morning sickness. It was pure, unadulterated terror. An unclaimed Omega pregnant with a pup was a disgrace. A threat to the pack's stability. My family, already struggling on the fringes of pack society, would be ruined. I would be cast out, left to face the world alone, a fate no shifter survived for long. My mind reeled back to that night 6 weeks ago. The Alpha's Ascension Gala. A night of shimmering masks and flowing champagne, where for once I didn't feel like a worthless Omega. I'd worn a simple silver mask, a dress borrowed from a friend, and a foolish sense of anonymity. He was there, of course. Kalen Vance. Alpha of the impossibly powerful and wealthy Silvermoon Syndicate, a pack that ran this city like their personal hunting ground. He was a legend, a myth made of muscle, money, and raw, untamed power. His reputation preceded him. A ruthless billionaire in the boardroom, a merciless alpha in pack matters, and an insatiable playboy in the bedroom. He wore a mask of polished obsidian, but there was no hiding the predator beneath. His scent had hit me from across the ballroom. A dizzying storm of crisp pine, charged ozone, and something else, something dark and possessive that called directly to the most primal part of my wolf. We hadn't spoken a word. Our eyes had met and the world had fallen away. It wasn't a seduction, it was a collision. A magnetic pull I was powerless to resist. He'd led me to a secluded balcony overlooking the glittering city, his hand a brand on the small of my back. I remember the feel of his lips, hard and demanding. I remember the low growl that vibrated in his chest as his wolf recognized mine. It wasn't gentle. It was acclaiming, a frenzy of instinct overwhelming all sense. He'd torn my mask away, but in the moon-drenched darkness, I was just a nameless she-wolf submitting to her alpha. And I had submitted completely and utterly. In the morning I was gone, a phantom in his 5-star hotel suite, leaving behind nothing but the faint scent of heather and shame. I thought that would be the end of it. A secret, dangerous memory to be buried deep. But now the proof of that night was growing inside me. A tiny ticking time bomb with the blood of an alpha god running through its veins. My breath hitched. The father of my child wasn't just any alpha. He was the alpha. The one man in the entire territory who could crush me with a single word. A man who cycled through women like they were seasonal luxuries and who, according to every rumor, had no interest in finding a mate or siring an heir. He saw it as a weakness. I pressed a hand to my still flat stomach, a fresh wave of panic cresting over me. I couldn't run. I couldn't hide. The pup's scent would eventually betray me, marking me as the bearer of his lineage. There was only one path forward, a path that led directly into the lion's den. I had to face him. I had to tell Kalen Vance, the alpha billionaire playboy who had ruined my life in a single night of blissful, anonymous passion, that I was carrying his child. My stomach churned. This wouldn't be a reunion. This would be an execution. I wasn't just doomed. I was already dead. Chapter 2, The Lion's Den. Vance Tower was a spear of glass and steel piercing the heart of the city, a monument to the very power I was about to confront. The lobby was a cold cathedral of marble and hushed reverence. Humans in sharp suits moved with purpose, their sense muted and insignificant. The few shifters I saw were betas and deltas, all bearing the subtle silver moon mark, their eyes sharp and their posture radiating disciplined strength. My own wolf whimpered, begging me to turn and flee, to find a deep dark hole to hide in. But the thought of the tiny life inside me, my pup, forced my feet forward. "Can I help you?" The receptionist was a human woman with a smile as polished and cold as the marble desk she sat behind. Her eyes flicked over my simple worn coat with subtle disdain. "I need to see Kaylin Vance," I said, my voice barely a whisper. The smile tightened. "Mr. Vance's schedule is fully committed. Do you have an appointment?" "No, but..." "Then I suggest you submit a request through his assistant's office. You can find the contact information on the corporate website." It was a dismissal, absolute and final. My desperation warred with my omega instincts to be agreeable and disappear. Desperation won. "It's a personal matter." "A pack matter," I added, the words feeling like ash in my mouth. Her eyes, which had been dismissive, now held a flicker of something else. Wariness. She knew what that meant. She pressed a button on her console, her voice dropping. "Security, we have a situation at the front desk." Before I could panic, a new voice cut through the tension, smooth as silk and sharp as a razor. "That won't be necessary, Helen." A woman emerged from a side corridor. She was tall, impossibly elegant in a tailored pantsuit, her blonde hair pulled into a severe chignon. Her scent was sharp, controlled, a high-ranking beta. She was Kaylin's infamous second-in-command, a she-wolf named Marissa. Her gaze swept over me, analytical and cold, missing nothing. "You're from Blackwood Creek," she stated, not a question. My scent, my worn clothes, my very aura screamed my lowly status. What business does an Omega have with our Alpha? My heart hammered against my ribs. It was now or never. "I have to speak with him. It's urgent." Marissa's eyes narrowed. For a long moment she just stared, and I felt like a specimen under a microscope. I could feel her weighing the disruption I would cause against the potential fallout of turning me away. Something in my scent, the frantic, terrified edge of a pregnant female, must have registered. "Fine," she said, her voice clipped. "But if you are wasting his time, the consequences will be severe. The Alpha does not tolerate frivolity." She led me to a private elevator that shot upwards with stomach-lurching speed. The doors opened directly into an office that was bigger than my entire family's house. One wall was a floor-to-ceiling window offering a god's-eye view of the city. The air was sterile, controlled, and saturated with one overwhelming scent: Kaylin's. Pine and ozone so potent it made my knees weak. And there he was. He stood by the window, his back to me, a phone pressed to his ear. He was in a perfectly tailored suit that did little to hide the raw power coiled in his broad shoulders and back. He radiated an aura of absolute command that filled every corner of the vast space. "Handle it," he said into the phone, his voice a low growl of authority before ending the call. He turned and my breath caught in my throat. The obsidian mask was gone and the full, devastating force of his presence hit me. Chiseled jaw, piercing golden eyes that seemed to see right through me, and a mouth that looked like it was carved for both pleasure and cruelty. He was more handsome, more intimidating than my fevered memories had allowed. His eyes scanned me, a flicker of annoyance crossing his features. "Marissa, what is this? I told you I wasn't to be disturbed." He didn't recognize me. Not a single spark of familiarity in those cold, golden depths. To him I was just another problem, an interruption. The anonymity of our night was a shield for him, but a spear through my heart. "She claims it's a pack matter, Alpha," Marissa said, her voice deferential. Kaylin's gaze landed on me again, impatient and dismissive. "Well, get on with it. I have a merger to close." My throat was dry. The words were trapped behind a wall of fear. My wolf was screaming, a high-pitched keen of terror in the back of my mind. I took a shaky breath, my hand instinctively going to my stomach. I swallowed, forcing myself to meet his gaze. "My name is Alara." He just stared, waiting. The silence stretched, thick with his impatience. I closed my eyes for a second, picturing the two pink lines. "For my pup." I opened them and the words tumbled out in a raw, desperate rush. "I'm pregnant. And it's yours." The air in the room instantly crackled with energy. The corporate CO vanished and the primal Alpha slammed to the forefront. His nostrils flared. His shoulders broadened as if preparing for a fight. And his eyes bled from gold to a molten, dangerous amber. Shock, disbelief, and a terrifying, possessive fury swirled within them, aimed directly at me. Chapter 3. The Unraveling of Control. The silence that followed my declaration was not empty. It was a living, breathing thing, heavy with menace. Kaylin didn't move, but the atmosphere in the room shifted violently, the pressure dropping as if before a hurricane. The air grew thick with his scent, no longer just dominant but laced with the acrid sting of disbelief and rage. It was a weapon, an invisible force meant to cow me into submission. "Get out," he growled, the words low and lethal. It wasn't directed at me. His molten gaze was locked on my face, but the command was for his beta. Marissa didn't hesitate, slipping out of the room and closing the heavy oak doors behind her with a soft, final click. We were alone. He took a step towards me, a slow, predatory glide that made every hair on my body stand on end. "What did you say?" "I said I'm pregnant," I repeated, my voice shaking but firm. I would not back down. My pup's life depended on it. A humorless, ugly laugh escaped his lips. "And you think it's mine? You, a little omega nobody from a backwater pack trying to pin a pup on me?" He circled me like a wolf sizing up prey. "How much do you want? Is that what this is? A pathetic shakedown? Who put you up to it?" The accusations were like slaps to the face. The cold, corporate shark was back, viewing this as a hostile takeover attempt, a problem to be neutralized. "It's not like that," I whispered, turning to keep him in my line of sight. "The gala. 6 weeks ago. The balcony." His eyes narrowed, a flicker of something, a memory perhaps, crossing his features before being ruthlessly suppressed. "I was at the gala. I entertained many guests." The dismissive way he said, "guests," made my stomach clench. I was just one of a nameless, faceless crowd to him. "We didn't talk," I pressed, my voice gaining strength from the sheer injustice of it. "Your wolf knew mine. You had a scratch," I blurted out, the memory suddenly vivid. "Just here," I gestured to my own side just above the hip. A thin white scar. I felt it under my hand. He stopped dead. The smug, dismissive look on his face faltered. I had him. That tiny, intimate detail had pierced his armor of denial. His control, so absolute just moments before, began to unravel at the edges. His jaw clenched so tight I could hear his teeth grind. "So you were the one," he murmured, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. The last vestiges of the human Sio burned away, consumed by the territorial fury of the Alpha. "You snuck into my bed and now you come here with this fabrication." "It's not a fabrication," I cried, tears of frustration stinging my eyes. "It will be proven," he snarled, his proximity overwhelming. I was trapped between the cold glass of the window and the burning heat of his body. He was so close I could feel the power radiating from him in waves. "I will bring in my own pack doctor. A healer I trust. They will examine you, and when they find you are lying, I will personally tear your pack apart for this insult." The threat was real. I could see it in the merciless glitter of his eyes. But I had the truth on my side. "Fine," I spat back, my own fear-fueled anger rising. "Do it. You'll see." My defiance seemed to shock him. He stared down at me, his golden eyes searching my face, looking for any sign of deception. He saw none. All he saw was the terrified, desperate, but truthful she-wolf standing before him. His wolf was at war with his mind. His mind saw a threat, a complication, a potential scandal. But his wolf smelled a pregnant female. A female carrying his bloodline. The primal possessive instinct of an alpha recognizing his own was a powerful, undeniable force. He reached out, his hand closing around my upper arm. His touch was not gentle. It was a shock of pure electricity that shot through my entire body, making me gasp. The contact was explosive, a jolt of recognition so powerful it momentarily stunned us both. My wolf leaped to the surface, recognizing his touch, submitting to it while simultaneously yearning for it. His grip tightened, his eyes darkening with a confusing mixture of rage and raw possession. "You're not going anywhere," he growled, his voice a guttural command that bypassed my ears and resonated deep in my bones. "You will stay here in this tower where I can watch you. You won't speak to anyone. You won't leave. You are my problem now." He pulled me closer, his hot breath ghosting across my cheek. "And I always solve my problems." I wasn't a person to him. I was a problem. A complication. But as his scent enveloped me, a mix of pine, ozone, and now a deep, dark possessiveness, one terrifying thought echoed in my mind. I was also his prisoner. Chapter 4. Gilded Cage. My prison was a penthouse suite 2 floors above Kalen's office. Gilded was an understatement. It was a palace in the sky, with plush white carpets, minimalist furniture that probably cost more than my family's house, and the same breathtaking floor-to-ceiling windows that now felt less like a view and more like the bars of a cage. The air was filtered, sterile, and still thick with the lingering scent of its owner. It was everywhere, seeping into the furniture, the air, my very clothes. A constant, suffocating reminder of who held my fate in his hands. I was left alone, but I was never truly alone. A stern-faced Delta guard was posted outside my door. My phone had been taken. I was cut off from everything I knew. The waiting was a special kind of torture. Every hour that crawled by was another hour for Kalen to build his case against me, another hour for his anger to fester. He'd visit unannounced. He wouldn't speak. He'd just appear at the door, his golden eyes sweeping over me, his expression unreadable. He'd watch me, his gaze intense and analytical, as if trying to dissect my motives, my very soul. During those silent inspections, the tension in the room would become a physical entity. My wolf would be a mess of contradictions, cowering from his intimidating presence while simultaneously preening under his attention. It was maddening. On the second day, I was pacing the length of the massive living room when he appeared. I hadn't heard him approach. He was just there, leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed over his powerful chest. He wore casual clothes, a simple black t-shirt and gray sweats, that somehow made him look even more dangerous, more primal than his expensive suits. "The doctor will be here in an hour," he said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. My heart began to pound a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The moment of truth. I just nodded, unable to speak, and turned to look out the window, my arms wrapped around my middle. I felt his eyes on my back, a tangible weight. I could feel the struggle within him. His logic told him I was a liar, but his alpha instincts were being driven mad by my scent. My omega scent, now tinged with the unmistakable fragrance of his pup, was something he was biologically hardwired to protect. The silence stretched, filled only by the hum of the city below. "Are you hungry?" he asked, the question so abrupt and mundane it startled me. I shook my head. My stomach was a knot of anxiety. "You should eat," he stated, his voice taking on a harder, commanding edge. For its sake. He couldn't even bring himself to say, pup, or baby. It was still an abstract problem to him. Before I could refuse again, he was moving. He strode to the small, state-of-the-art kitchen, pulling things from the fridge with an efficient grace that surprised me. Minutes later, the scent of toasted bread and melting cheese filled the air. He placed a plate with a grilled cheese sandwich and a glass of milk on the marble island. Simple, comforting food. It was so jarringly domestic, so at odds with the cold, ruthless man I thought he was. I hesitated, then slowly walked over, perching on one of the stools. I took a tentative bite. It was delicious. As I ate, he leaned against the opposite counter, watching me. The silence was different now, less hostile, more observant. "Why didn't you come to me sooner?" he asked, his voice low. I swallowed my mouthful. I was scared. Scared I'd deny it? "Scared you'd destroy me," I answered honestly, meeting his gaze. His eyes held mine, and for the first time, I saw something beyond anger and suspicion. A flicker of something. It wasn't empathy. It was more primal than that. A grudging acknowledgement of the power he wielded and the fear it inspired. The doorbell chimed, a soft, electronic sound that shattered the fragile truce. The doctor was here. Kalen's face immediately hardened, the mask of the cold alpha slamming back into place. He gestured for me to follow him into the living room, where an older, gray-haired man with a kind face and the scent of a pack healer waited. The examination was clinical, professional, but deeply humiliating. I lay on the plush sofa, Kalen standing by the window, his back to us, a rigid statue of tension. The doctor was gentle, his hands sure and his voice soothing, but I felt exposed, my body and my secret laid bare for a stranger's assessment and my captor's judgment. After what felt like an eternity, the doctor packed his bag. He turned to Kalen. "Alpha," he said, his voice steady and clear, cutting through the thick silence. "The Omega is approximately 7 weeks pregnant." He paused, his gaze flicking to me and then back to Kalen. "And based on the scent markers and the pup's developing alpha signature, there is no doubt. The pup is yours." The room went deathly still. I held my breath, my eyes locked on Kalen's broad back. He didn't move. He didn't speak. It felt like the world was holding its breath with me, waiting for the verdict. Then slowly he turned. His face was a mask of stone, but his eyes were a swirling tempest of gold. The war inside him was over. The truth was undeniable. The problem was real. Chapter 5. The Alpha's Claim. The doctor's words hung in the air, echoing in the suffocating silence of the penthouse. Kalen dismissed the healer with a curt nod, the man scurrying out as if escaping the blast radius of an explosion. The door clicked shut and once again we were alone. He stared at me, but his gaze was distant, unfocused, as if he were looking at a complex equation he couldn't solve. The rage had subsided, replaced by a cold, frighteningly calm intensity. This was the billionaire CEO, the ruthless strategist, calculating his next move. The confirmation of my pregnancy hadn't brought relief. It had simply moved us to the next, more dangerous stage of his plan. An heir, he said, the words clipped, precise. He wasn't speaking to me but to himself, processing the monumental shift in his world. Avance, heir. He began to pace, his long strides eating up the space in the massive room. His scent was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions: shock, reluctant possessiveness, and a deep, simmering frustration. He, Kalen Vance, the man who prided himself on his absolute control, had been undone by a single night of primal carelessness. "This changes things," he said finally, stopping in front of me. He looked down at me, his height and sheer presence making me feel small, fragile. "This cannot be a scandal. My family, my business, the syndicate, they cannot be tainted by whispers of an alpha's bastard pup born to some nameless omega." The words were a physical blow. Nameless omega. Bastard pup. A cold dread washed over me. What was he going to do? Hide me away until the baby was born and then take it from me? The thought was so horrific my wolf snarled in the back of my mind, a sudden fierce wave of maternal protectiveness surging through me. "You won't take my baby," I whispered, the words a raw, trembling threat. His eyes snapped to mine, surprised by my tone. A flicker of something that might have been respect shone in their golden depths before being extinguished. "The pup will be raised as a Vance. It will have my name, my protection, my legacy. It will want for nothing. It will have its mother," I insisted, pushing myself up to stand to face him on my own 2 feet. A smirk, devoid of any warmth, touched his lips. "Yes. It will." He took a step closer, crowding my space, forcing me to tilt my head back to look at him. His scent was intoxicating, a deliberate tactic to overwhelm my senses. "Because you will be my mate." My jaw dropped. Of all the scenarios I had imagined, this was not one of them. "What?" "It's the only logical solution," he continued, his voice a low, reasonable purr that was more terrifying than his anger. "A swift public mating. It silences all questions. It legitimizes the heir. It protects the Vance name from scandal and the pup from any challenges to its lineage. A surprise union perhaps, but a powerful one. The Alpha of Silvermoon taking an Omega mate. It will be seen as a statement of strength, not a shotgun wedding." He laid it all out like a business proposal, a strategic merger of 2 unequal entities. There was no mention of affection, of care, of us. It was a transaction. Cold, calculated, and absolute. I won't," I stammered, my mind reeling. His expression darkened. "That wasn't a request." The air crackled with his alpha command, a palpable pressure that bore down on me, demanding my obedience. "This is what is happening. You will live here as my mate. You will be seen on my arm. You will give birth to my heir. In return, your family will be taken care of, their debts settled. They will be given a place of honor within their pack. You and the pup will have my absolute protection. Those are my terms." He was offering me a gilded cage, offering my family a security they'd never known, all in exchange for my life. My freedom. As the cold, logical points of his contract settled into my horrified mind, his wolf began to break through his control. His eyes darkened to a deep, molten gold. He leaned in, his nose brushing against the sensitive skin of my neck, and inhaled deeply. A possessive, guttural growl rumbled in his chest, an involuntary sound of pure, primal satisfaction. He smelled me, the Omega who carried his pup, and his instincts were overriding his logic. He pulled back, his eyes blazing with a fire that was no longer cold calculation but raw, hungry possession. His hand came up to cup my jaw, his thumb stroking my lower lip. The pack council is being convened as we speak, he murmured, his voice dropping to a gravelly, hypnotic whisper that sent shivers down my spine. I am informing them of my decision. To silence all dissent, to secure my claim on you and my heir. The ceremony will be tonight. My breath hitched. Tonight. It was all happening so fast, a tidal wave pulling me under. He leaned closer, his lips hovering inches from mine, his hot breath a promise of both pleasure and pain. Tonight, Ilara, he whispered, his voice a silken threat that wrapped around my heart. You become a Vance. You become mine. Whether you like it or not. Chapter 6. The Unveiling. The next few hours were a blur of orchestrated activity, a whirlwind designed to strip away the last remnants of Ilara and mold me into a Vance. A team of women, all silent and efficient with the scent of Silver Moon Pack members, descended upon the penthouse. They were stylists, hairdressers, makeup artists, a small army to prepare a sacrificial lamb for the altar. I was bathed in water scented with oils so expensive they probably cost a year of my father's wages. My nails were filed and painted a demure, pearlescent white. My hair was twisted and pinned into an elegant creation at the nape of my neck that felt heavy and foreign. Throughout it all, I remained silent, a living doll being dressed for a party I never wanted to attend. Every touch felt like a violation, every compliment on my skin tone or bone structure felt like an assessment of livestock. They were polishing an asset, not celebrating a bride. My wolf paced restlessly under my skin, whining at the indignity, at the cold, impersonal nature of it all. This wasn't a mating. It was an acquisition. Marissa arrived as they were finishing my makeup. She carried a garment bag that seemed to float on air. She dismissed the team with a flick of her wrist, leaving the two of us alone in the cavernous bedroom. The silence she left in her wake was more intimidating than the stylist's quiet efficiency. The Alpha chose this for you, she said, her voice betraying no emotion as she unzipped the bag. The dress that she pulled out was not what I expected. It wasn't an ostentatious ball gown dripping with jewels. It was a slip of ivory silk, simple and devastatingly elegant. It was designed to skim the body, to hint at the curves beneath without overtly displaying them. It was modest yet impossibly sensual. It was a dress that whispered of secrets, not one that shouted for attention. It was a dress for a mate, not a mistress, and the realization sent a confusing pang through my chest. The council is assembled, Marissa said, her sharp eyes watching me as I stared at the dress. They are skeptical. An Omega from a minor pack appearing out of nowhere. You must understand the position you have put him in. Her tone was accusatory, as if this were all my calculated plan. Tonight you will be silent. You will be deferential. You will look at him and only him. Your absolute submission is the only thing that will sell this union. Do you understand? I nodded numbly, my throat too tight to speak. Submission. That was my role. The dutiful, silent, submissive Omega mate. As I slipped into the dress, the silk felt like a second skin, cool and heavy against my flesh. It fit perfectly, of course. He would have known my measurements. The thought sent another shiver, not of fear this time but of something darker, more complicated, down my spine. I looked in the full-length mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Her eyes were wide with terror, but she was encased in the armor of wealth and power. She looked like she belonged in this world, even if she was crumbling on the inside. That's when he walked in. I didn't hear the door. I just felt the shift in the air, the sudden, oppressive weight of his presence. I turned and my breath caught. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit, his white shirt a stark contrast against his tan skin. He looked like a god of darkness and power, his golden eyes blazing with an intensity that pinned me to the spot. His gaze swept over me, from the crown of my head to the tips of my bare feet on the plush carpet. He froze. For a single unguarded moment, the mask of the ruthless CEO and the cold Alpha slipped. His nostrils flared, taking in my scent, my own unique fragrance now mingled with the pups, wrapped in the scent of expensive oils and silk. His pupils dilated, the gold in his eyes turning to a dark, molten amber. A low, almost inaudible growl rumbled in his chest, a sound of pure, unwilling, possessive instinct. He saw me. Not as a problem or a complication or a business merger. In that moment he saw me as a female, his female, and the raw, predatory desire that slammed into me across the room was so potent it made my knees buckle. The bond, not yet formed but already a ghost between us, flared to life, singing in response to his silent, possessive call. He blinked and the moment was gone. The mask was back in place, his features smoothing into an unreadable canvas of control. But it was too late. I had seen it. I had felt it. Beneath the cold strategist, the wolf was there and it was watching me. And it was hungry. He walked towards me, stopping just before me. He didn't touch me, but I could feel the heat rolling off his body. "It's time," he said, his voice a low gravel. He held out his arm, a formal, chilling gesture. My hand trembled as I placed it on his forearm. His muscles were like steel beneath the expensive fabric. The contact was electric, a jolt of awareness that made my pulse leap. He looked down at my hand, then back to my face, his expression a carefully guarded storm. "Remember what's at stake," he murmured, his voice a quiet threat meant only for me. "For all of us." Then, with my hand on his arm, he led me from my gilded cage to face his pack. Chapter 7. The Alpha's Decree. The council chamber was in the deepest heart of the tower, a place of stone, steel, and shadow. There were no windows. The room was circular, dominated by a massive round table carved from a single piece of dark polished wood. Seated around it were 12 shifters, 10 males and 2 females, their faces etched with age and power. Their scents filled the room, a heady mix of old authority, dominance, and skepticism. They were the elders, the power brokers of the Silvermoon Syndicate, and their collective gaze felt like a physical weight pressing down on me. Kalen led me to the center of the circle, his hand moving from my arm to the small of my back, a gesture of both presentation and possession. He didn't ask me to sit. He kept me standing by his side, a silent testament to my new status as his property. "Elders," Kalen's voice boomed, imbued with the full resonating power of his alpha command. The air vibrated with it, demanding silence and attention. "I have brought you here to announce my decision. I am taking a mate." A low murmur rippled through the council. Eyes darted between Kalen and me, filled with calculation and unconcealed judgment. An old, grizzled wolf with a scarred face and the scent of a former warrior leaned forward. "An Omega, Kalen?" His voice was a gravelly rumble. "From a pack with no standing? This is unconventional." "It is my will," Kalen stated, his voice dropping, laced with a dangerous edge that tolerated no argument. His hand on my back pressed harder, a silent command for me to remain still. "She is the one I have chosen. More importantly, she carries my heir." The word heir fell like a thunderclap in the silent room. The skepticism in their eyes was instantly replaced by shock, which quickly morphed into sharp, assessing interest. They looked at me differently now. I was no longer just an Omega. I was a vessel, the future of their lineage. "The ceremony will be performed now," Kalen continued, his gaze sweeping the table, daring any of them to object. "To solidify the union and protect the bloodline. There will be no questions, no debate. Only acceptance." No one spoke. The force of his will was absolute. He nodded to a figure standing in the shadows. The pack priest, a man even older than the council members, stepped forward, his robes rustling softly. The ceremony was ancient, brutal, and swift. It was not about love or partnership. It was about a claim. The priest's words were a low, melodic chant in the old tongue, speaking of loyalty, strength, and the continuation of the pack. I barely heard them. All my senses were focused on Kalen. His scent was overwhelming, a possessive storm of pine and ozone. The heat from his body was a constant, distracting brand against my side. The priest presented a silver bowl and a small, sharp obsidian knife. "The blood," the priest intoned. Kalen took the knife without hesitation and sliced a clean line across his own palm. Blood, dark and rich, welled up. He didn't even flinch. Then he took my hand. His touch was surprisingly gentle as he turned my palm up. He made a matching cut, the sting sharp and quick. My breath hitched. He pressed his bleeding palm to mine. The moment our blood mingled, a shockwave of energy jolted through me. It was raw, primal. A connection deep and undeniable flared to life between us. I gasped, my eyes flying to his. In their golden depths, I saw the same shock reflected back at me. This was more than a ceremony. It was an awakening. "And now the mark," the priest said, his voice solemn. Kalen's hand on my back guided me, turning me so my neck was exposed to him. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. The final, irrevocable act. I could feel his hot breath on my skin, could hear the low growl building in his chest. His wolf was at the surface, hungry and dominant, ready to claim what was his. He lowered his head. I braced myself for the pain, squeezing my eyes shut. His teeth, sharp and unforgiving, sank into the sensitive flesh where my neck met my shoulder. A scream tore from my throat, but it was a sound of more than just pain. It was a cry of shock, of release, of overwhelming sensation. An agony that was inexplicably, terrifyingly, laced with pleasure shot through my entire nervous system. And then came the bond. It wasn't a flare of energy this time. It was a supernova. A torrent of his essence, his power, his possessiveness, his rage, his hidden loneliness, his fierce, reluctant protectiveness of the pup, crashed into me, flooding my mind and soul. At the same time, he was hit with my own terror, my desperation, my fierce maternal love, and my deep, secret well of grief. The connection was a living, breathing entity, a psychic bridge snapping into place between us. I felt him. He felt me. He pulled back, his mouth stained with my blood. We stared at each other, both of us panting, our eyes wide with the sheer, overwhelming power of what had just happened. The council, the priest, the stone chamber. It all faded away. There was only him and me and this raw, unbreakable chain that now bound us together, soul to soul. He had claimed me, and in doing so had shackled himself to me in a way his cold, logical mind could never have anticipated. The transaction was complete, but the cost was a loss of control neither of us had been prepared to pay. Chapter 8. The Bond's First Night. Returning to the penthouse was like entering a different universe. The air, which had once felt sterile and foreign, now hummed with a new, vibrant energy. It was the energy of the bond, a tangible electric current that arced between us in the silence. The scent of our mingled blood and the raw, primal act of the mating still clung to us, marking the space as ours. Kalen didn't speak. He walked ahead of me, his shoulders rigid, his posture radiating a tension that was a stark contrast to the absolute dominance he'd displayed in the council chamber. He was fighting it. I could feel it through the bond, a maelstrom of confusion and fury directed at himself. He'd intended the mating to be a political maneuver, a sterile act of control. He had not been prepared for the visceral, soul-deep reality of it. He hadn't been prepared to feel me. He stopped at the door to the master suite, the room I'd been prepared in. "This is your room," he said, his voice strained, refusing to look at me. "You will find everything you need. We can discuss logistics in the morning." He was dismissing me. On our mating night, a wave of cold, sharp rejection lanced through me, amplified tenfold by the fresh, screaming bond. Felt like a physical wound. My wolf, now irrevocably tied to his, howled in protest. It was wrong. We were supposed to be together. The instincts were overpowering, a biological imperative that overrode fear and logic. "No," I said, the word quiet but firm. He finally turned, his golden eyes narrowed and dangerous. "No. I am your mate," I said, the words feeling strange and powerful on my tongue. "This is our mating night." A humorless smirk twisted his lips. This was a transactional era, not a romance. The public display is over. We don't have to pretend behind closed doors. "I'm not pretending," I shot back, stepping closer to him, fueled by a new, unfamiliar courage born from the bond. "You can feel it, can't you? This thing between us. It wants us together." "What I want," he snarled, taking a step towards me, his control fraying, "is for my life to go back to the way it was yesterday. What I want is not to be shackled to an omega I barely know because of one moment of carelessness." The words should have hurt, but they were blunted by the truth I could now feel humming beneath his anger. He was lying. Not about wanting his old life back, but about the bond being a shackle. It was a tether, an anchor, and it was driving his wolf insane to be this close to me and not close the distance. "You're a terrible liar, Alpha," I whispered, tilting my chin up. "I can feel you. You want this as much as I do. Your wolf is screaming for its mate." His jaw clenched, and the air around us crackled with his barely suppressed power. "Be careful, little Omega. You mistake instinct for emotion. My wolf may want to claim its territory, but that doesn't mean I have to indulge it." "Then why are you still standing here?" I challenged, taking the final step that closed the space between us. I placed my hand flat on his chest, right over his heart. It was hammering, a frantic, wild rhythm that matched my own. His skin was scorching hot, even through the fabric of his shirt. The touch was a lit match to gasoline. A guttural roar tore from his throat and he slammed me back against the wall, his body caging mine. His hands tangled in my hair, tilting my head back, while his other arm banded around my waist, crushing me against the hard planes of his body. The sheer, overwhelming force of him stole the air from my lungs. "You think you know what I want?" he growled, his face inches from mine, his molten gold eyes blazing with a terrifying mix of fury and raw, unadulterated lust. "You have no idea what you've unleashed." My heart was a frantic drum against his. The bond between us was a roaring inferno, screaming for completion. Fear and a dizzying, terrifying arousal warred within me. I was trapped, pinned by the most powerful predator I had ever known, and every instinct in my body was crying out for him to devour me. "Show me," I breathed, the words a dare, a plea, a surrender. His control finally, irrevocably shattered. With a sound that was half groan, half snarl, his mouth crashed down on mine. It wasn't a kiss. It was a claiming. Hard, hot, and punishing. It was a battle for dominance that I was destined to lose, and in that moment I realized I didn't want to win. I wanted to be consumed by the storm. Chapter 9. The morning after the merger. I awoke slowly, adrift in a sea of unfamiliar sensations. The first was the weight. A heavy, muscular arm was draped possessively over my waist, anchoring me in place. The second was the scent. Rich, intoxicating pine and ozone, no longer just a fragrance in the air but a scent that had seeped into my skin, my hair, the very fabric of the sheets tangled around us. It was Kaylin's scent, mingled with my own, creating a new, unique fragrance of a mated pair. The third was the feeling, a deep, thrumming hum beneath my skin, the bond settled and sated, purring with contentment. I cracked open an eye. The pearly gray light of dawn was filtering into the master suite. Last night had been a blur of fire and instinct, a storm of desperate touches and raw, primal need. The bond had demanded its due, and we had both surrendered to it completely. He had been a relentless lover, fierce and possessive, mapping every inch of my body as if claiming territory he'd just conquered. He was still asleep, his face turned towards me on the pillow. The harsh lines of his jaw were softened, his lips slightly parted. The ruthless alpha and the cold CO were gone, and in their place was just a man. A dangerously beautiful man who now owned a piece of my soul. My fingers itched to trace the line of his brow, to brush a stray lock of dark hair from his forehead. As if sensing my thoughts, his eyes snapped open. The gold was clear, sharp, and instantly guarded. The man was gone. The alpha was back. He stared at me for a long moment, the silence thick with the unspoken memories of the night. Then he disentangled himself from me, moving with a fluid grace that was almost violent in its suddenness. He sat on the edge of the bed, his back to me, the powerful muscles of his shoulders and back tense. The contented hum of the bond immediately soured, replaced by a low thrum of anxiety. "I have an early meeting," he said, his voice flat, devoid of the gravelly passion from last night. He stood and walked towards the ensuite bathroom without a backward glance. The invisible walls were back up higher and thicker than before. I lay there, the warmth of his body rapidly fading from the sheets, a hollow ache blooming in my chest. The rejection, silent though it was a sharp, painful sting delivered directly through the bond. He was treating last night, our mating night, like a regrettable business expense. A duty fulfilled. When he emerged from the bathroom dressed in a sharp gray suit, he was all business. He didn't look at the bed, didn't look at me. He was already on his phone, speaking in clipped tones. "Marissa, I want the security detail on my floor doubled. And I want a full threat assessment report on the rival packs by noon. Focus on the Volkovs. I don't like the timing of their recent acquisitions." He paused, listening. His eyes briefly flickered to me, then to my stomach. A new kind of tension, sharp and protective, entered his posture. "Yes, it is a new priority. The absolute highest priority. Handle it." He ended the call and finally looked at me, his expression unreadable. "There are clothes for you in the walk-in closet. Marissa has cleared your schedule for the day. You are not to leave this penthouse." "You mean I'm still a prisoner?" I said, bitterness lacing my voice. "You are my mate," he corrected, his voice cold. "And you are carrying my heir. That makes you a target." You will be protected and you will follow my rules. This is not a negotiation. The cage hadn't vanished. Its bars had just been reinforced. He saw me not as a partner but as a vulnerability, a weak point his enemies could exploit. The thought sent a chill through me. His world was filled with dangers I couldn't even comprehend. My family, I said, my voice small. You said you'd take care of them. Their debts were settled this morning, he replied, adjusting his cuffs. A property has been purchased for them within the Blackwood Creek's safest territory. Your father has been offered a senior position on their council, a position I created for him. They are secure. He'd done it. He'd upheld his end of the bargain with ruthless efficiency. He'd bought my family's security and in doing so had bought my compliance. I should have felt relieved, but I just felt empty. He walked to the door, pausing with his hand on the handle. There is a charity gala tonight. For the city hospital's new pediatric wing. We will be attending. It will be your first official appearance. Marissa will provide you with the details and see to your preparations. He was about to leave, to walk out and leave me alone with the echoing silence and the confusing, aching bond. Kaylin, I said, his name feeling foreign on my lips. He paused, turning his head slightly, his profile sharp and unforgiving. Last night, I started, not even sure what I wanted to say. Did it mean anything to you? Did you feel it too? He cut me off before I could finish. Last night the bond was sealed, he said, his voice a low, final command. It was a necessary consummation. Now the real work begins. Be ready by 7. And with that he was gone, leaving me alone in the vast, empty bed, the scent of him all around me, the cold reality of our merger settling in like a winter frost. Chapter 10, The First Test. The gala was a glittering battlefield. It was held in a grand ballroom with soaring ceilings and crystal chandeliers that dripped light onto a sea of $1,000 suits and couture gowns. The air was thick with the scent of money, power, and ambition. For these shifters, this wasn't a party. It was a hunting ground, a place for forging alliances and slitting throats with a smile. Kaylin was a king in his element. He moved through the crowd with an easy, predatory grace, a circle of deference parting before him. I was on his arm, a new, exotic jewel on display. My dress, chosen by Marissa, was a deep sapphire blue that clung to my curves. It was beautiful, but it felt like a costume. My every move was stiff and awkward. The bond was a live wire between us. His hand on the small of my back was a constant source of heat, a possessive anchor in the swirling chaos. I could feel his awareness of every gaze that landed on me, his low, simmering irritation whenever another male's eyes lingered too long. We were a spectacle. The alpha of the Silver Moon Syndicate and his surprise omega mate. Whispers followed us like the rustle of our clothes. I could feel the weight of their scrutiny, the sharp, assessing glances of the she-wolves, their sense a mix of cloying perfume and bitter jealousy. To them I was an upstart, an anomaly who had somehow landed the biggest prize of all. Kaylin, darling. A voice like poisoned honey cut through the din. A she-wolf with fiery red hair and the sleek, dangerous grace of a panther detached herself from a group and slinked towards us. Her scent was spicy and aggressive, a high-ranking beta used to getting what she wanted. Cassandra, Kaylin's voice was polite, but I felt a spike of annoyance from him through the bond. Her emerald eyes, sharp and intelligent, flicked over me with blatant disdain before landing back on Kaylin. I must say I was shocked to hear the news. I never took you for the type to settle down. Especially with, well. She let the insult hang in the air, her painted red lips curving into a smirk. Elara is my mate, Kaylin said, his voice dropping a full octave, laced with an unmistakable warning. His hand on my back tightened, pulling me flush against his side. It was a clear, public display of ownership. Cassandra's smirk didn't falter. She extended a perfectly manicured hand to me. Cassandra Volkov. My family and the Vances go way back. Though we're usually on opposite sides of the boardroom. Her grip was surprisingly strong, her nails digging slightly into my skin. The name from Kaylin's phone call. Arrival pack. It's a pleasure, I murmured, my omega instincts screaming at me to be polite, to smooth over the tension. Oh, I'm sure it is, she purred, her eyes raking over me again. You must be very fertile. It's the only explanation that makes sense for him to stoop so low. A low, guttural growl rumbled in Kaylin's chest, a sound that made the hairs on my arms stand up. Several nearby conversations faltered as heads turned. Kaylin's golden eyes narrowed, the predator beneath the surface breaking free. "That's enough, Cassandra. I'm just making conversation," she said, feigning innocence as she released my hand. "Welcome to the family, Alara. I do hope you know what you've gotten yourself into." She gave Kaylin a lingering look, a mix of old familiarity and fresh challenge, before turning and melting back into the crowd. Kaylin steered me away, his body a rigid wall of fury. "Stay away from her," he growled, his voice a low command meant only for me. "I didn't do anything," I protested. "Her pack and mine are on the verge of a corporate war. She sees you as a weakness. A pressure point. Don't give her the chance to apply it." Later, while Kaylin was cornered by a group of human politicians, I slipped away to the ladies' room, needing a moment to breathe. The opulence of the marble and gold bathroom was nauseating. As I was splashing cold water on my wrists, the door swished open and Cassandra walked in. She leaned against the counter, blocking my exit, her reflection in the mirror cool and predatory. "He's very protective of his new toy, isn't he?" she said, inspecting her red nails. I didn't respond, turning to dry my hands. "You have no idea the world you've stumbled into, do you, little Omega?" she continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You think this is about a baby? This is about power. Legacies. Wars fought in boardrooms and back alleys." She pushed off the counter and walked towards me, stopping so close I could smell the sharp, spicy scent of her perfume and the underlying threat of her wolf. "A word of advice," she whispered, her green eyes boring into mine. "Be careful. Alphas like Kaylin have more enemies than you can possibly imagine." She smiled, a chilling, razor-sharp expression. "And they always go for the weak spot." Her eyes dropped pointedly to my stomach before meeting mine again. "You and that pup, you're the weakest spot he's ever had. I'd sleep with one eye open if I were you." Chapter 11. Scars and Secrets. Cassandra's threat clung to me like a toxic perfume long after we returned to the silent sanctuary of the penthouse. I watched Kaylin as he shed his suit jacket, his movements fluid and controlled, but the bond told me a different story. It was a turbulent sea of fury, protectiveness, and a dark, simmering violence aimed at the Volkovs. He saw the threat to me, to the pup, as a direct challenge to his authority, and his entire being was coiled like a spring ready to strike. He poured himself a whiskey, the amber liquid catching the light. I watched him, my heart a nervous bird in my chest. "She's right, isn't she?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper in the vast, quiet room. "I'm a liability." He downed the whiskey in one smooth motion, the glass clicking softly as he set it down on the marble bar. He turned to face me, his golden eyes dark and unreadable. "You are my mate," he stated, as if that were the only answer required. "Anyone who touches you will answer to me." "That doesn't make me less of a target," I pressed, hugging my arms around myself. The memory of Cassandra's chilling smile made my skin crawl. "It makes me a bigger one." He walked towards me, his presence a heavy, comforting weight in the room. He stopped just before me, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to meet his gaze. "Then I will have to be a better shield." He reached out, his fingers gently tracing the line of my jaw. His touch was hesitant, almost tentative, a stark contrast to the fierce possession of our mating night. It was a question in exploration. My skin tingled at the contact and my wolf purred, leaning into his touch. The bond between us warmed, a soft, golden hum that momentarily pushed back the shadows. "You're scared," he murmured, his thumb stroking my cheek. It wasn't a question. He could feel it through the bond, the sharp, acrid tang of my fear. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. "Good," he said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "Fear keeps you sharp. But don't let it consume you. You're not weak, Alara. An Omega who would walk into my office and face me down is anything but weak." His words were a balm to my frayed nerves, a surprising acknowledgement that he saw more in me than just a vessel for his heir. He saw strength. My eyes fell to his hand, the one that had held the whiskey glass. The scar from the mating ritual was a thin, silvery line across his palm, a permanent mark that matched my own. Impulsively, I reached out and took his hand, my fingers tracing the scar. He tensed at my touch, his muscles locking, but he didn't pull away. I looked up at his face. His expression was a storm of conflicting emotions, his jaw tight, his eyes dark with memories I couldn't access. You have others, I whispered, my gaze dropping to his torso, where the edge of another older scar peeked out from the collar of his shirt. I felt it. The night on the balcony. The thin white scar on his side. A heavy silence descended upon us. The bond was a tumultuous current, carrying waves of something dark and painful from him to me. It wasn't just physical pain. It was deeper, a soul-deep wound that had never properly healed. He pulled his hand from my grasp and turned away, walking over to the window to stare out at the glittering, indifferent city below. Every alpha has scars, he said, his voice flat. They are a part of the price of power. That's not what I feel, I said softly, walking to stand beside him, though I kept a respectful distance. This is different. It's not just a battle scar. It's grief. He flinched, a barely perceptible tightening of his shoulders, but through the bond, I felt the truth of my words hit him like a physical blow. The raw, agonizing pain that lanced through our connection made me gasp. It was a grief so profound, so absolute, it felt like a black hole pulling all light and warmth into it. You don't know anything, he growled, his voice rough with an emotion he was desperately trying to suppress. I know what it feels like to lose someone, I whispered, my own past rising up to meet his pain. I know what it's like when a part of your soul is just gone. He turned to look at me then, and the raw vulnerability in his golden eyes stole the air from my lungs. The mask was gone. The alpha, the CO, they had vanished, leaving behind a man drowning in a pain he'd carried alone for years. My parents, he said, the words torn from him. And my younger sister. A rival pack. It was supposed to be a negotiation. It was an ambush. I was 18. Just claimed my alpha status. I was supposed to protect them. His voice broke on the last words. I was the only one who walked away. The story, the raw, agonizing confession explained everything. His obsession with control, his ruthless protection of his pack, his avoidance of a mate, his fear of weakness. He saw love not as a strength but as a vulnerability, another potential loss he couldn't bear to endure. And now I was his biggest vulnerability of all. Tears pricked my eyes for the boy he had been, for the man he had become. Without thinking, I closed the distance between us and wrapped my arms around his waist, pressing my face into the solid warmth of his chest. He was rigid at first, a statue of stone and grief. Then slowly, hesitantly, his arms came around me, pulling me tight against him. He buried his face in my hair and a shudder racked his powerful frame. We stood there for a long time, two broken souls clinging to each other in the darkness, the bond between us a fragile, flickering light in a world of shadows. Chapter 12. A Fragile Truce. The morning after Kaylin's confession dawned with a different quality of light. The invisible walls between us hadn't vanished, but they had become porous, admitting a fragile sense of understanding. We didn't speak of his family again. The wound was too raw, the grief too vast to be contained in mere words. But the knowledge of it now lay between us, a shared secret that had subtly, irrevocably, altered the landscape of our forced union. He started having meals with me. Not every meal, his schedule was still a relentless beast, but he would make a point to join me for breakfast or a late dinner. The conversations were stilted at first, circling around safe topics. Pack business, city politics, the progress of the pediatric wing at the hospital. He was assessing me, I realized, testing my intelligence, my opinions. He'd lay out a complex business problem and I, drawing on a surprising well of common sense I never knew I had, would offer a simple Omega's perspective, one focused on community, stability, and the well-being of the weakest members. To my shock, he listened. He wouldn't always agree, but he would tilt his head, his golden eyes narrowed in concentration, and I could feel through the bond the way he turned my words over in his mind, examining them from all angles. It was a heady, intoxicating feeling, being seen as more than just a vessel or a liability. I was becoming a consultant, an advisor. One evening he was reviewing security reports, a deep scowl on his face. The Volkovs are making a play for the shipping routes on the east side, he said, tossing a tablet onto the coffee table. It's a direct challenge. If they control the port, they control half the city's commerce. A direct fight would be costly, I said, looking at the complex flow charts on the screen. For both sides. Many of the dockworkers are from smaller, neutral packs. A war between you and the Volkovs would devastate their families. It's a matter of dominance, Ilera, he said, his voice hard. Weakness invites attack. Or, I countered softly, a show of unexpected strength could be more effective. What if you didn't fight for the routes? What if you made them worthless? He looked at me intrigued. Go on. You're a billionaire, Kalen. You build things. The dockworkers, their families, what do they need? Better housing? A pack-run school for their pups? A clinic? Invest in the community. Build something for them. Make their loyalty to you to Silvermoon stronger than any allegiance bought by the Volkov's threats. Make the people your territory, not just the land. He stared at me, a slow, grudging smile touching his lips. It was the first genuine smile I had ever seen from him, and it transformed his face, chasing away the shadows. It was breathtaking. An Omega's solution, he murmured, the words holding a new kind of respect. Attack with kindness. He picked up the tablet, his mind already racing, the strategist re-engaged, but now with a new, unexpected weapon in his arsenal. The physical space between us was shrinking as well. One night I woke from a nightmare, the ghostly sensation of cold water closing over my head, a relic of my mother's death. I sat bolt upright, gasping, my heart hammering. The bond, sensing my distress, flared with alarm. Before I could even catch my breath, the door to my bedroom flew open and Kalen was there, dressed only in a pair of sweatpants, his hair tousled from sleep. What is it? He demanded, his eyes wild, the protective alpha instantly on high alert. Nothing, I gasped, clutching the sheets. Just a bad dream. He didn't leave. He walked over to the bed, the mattress dipping as he sat on the edge. He didn't speak, just placed his large, warm hand on my back, a solid, grounding presence in the darkness. The steady rhythm of his breathing, the comforting weight of his touch, and the soothing calm he pushed towards me through the bond slowly chased the last of the terror away. It was about my mother. I found myself whispering into the darkness. She drowned. I was there. He didn't offer empty platitudes or condolences. He just squeezed my shoulder gently, a silent acknowledgement of my pain, a shared understanding between two souls marked by grief. I leaned into his touch, my head resting against his shoulder, and for the first time since this ordeal began, I didn't feel like a prisoner. I felt safe. He stayed until my breathing evened out, until the frantic terror in the bond subsided into a quiet sorrow. As I drifted back to sleep, I felt him gently lay me back against the pillows and pull the covers up. I was half asleep, but I could have sworn I heard him whisper, so softly it might have been a dream, "I've got you." Our truce was fragile, born of necessity and shared pain, but it was real. And in the quiet moments, in the dead of night, it was beginning to feel dangerously like something more. Chapter 13. The Serpent in the Garden. Our fragile peace was shattered during a routine prenatal checkup. The pack doctor, the same kind-faced man who had confirmed my pregnancy, now visited the penthouse weekly. These visits had become a strange, domestic ritual. Kalen would always be present, standing off to the side, his arms crossed, a silent, imposing guardian. He'd listen intently to the doctor's reports on the pup's growth and heartbeat, and through the bond, I would feel a powerful, possessive pride radiate from him. It was a pride he never showed on his face, but I could feel it, a fierce, primal joy that was both terrifying and deeply moving. On this particular day, the doctor had just finished. "Everything is perfect," he announced with a warm smile. "The pup is strong. An alpha pup without a doubt." A jolt went through Kalen. I felt his shock and then another wave of that fierce, overwhelming pride. An alpha heir. The continuation of his line was secure. After the doctor left, a celebratory mood, quiet and unspoken, settled in the room. Kalen was looking at my stomach, a strange, soft expression on his face. It was one of the few times I'd seen him look completely unguarded. That was when Marissa arrived. She entered without knocking, her face a mask of cold professionalism, but her scent was sharp with agitation. "Alpha, there's a situation that requires your immediate attention." Kalen's expression hardened instantly. "What is it?" "It's about the Blackwood Creek pack," she said, her eyes flicking to me for a fraction of a second. "Your investment in the Omega's family. It's causing unrest. Some of the older families feel their positions are being threatened by the new status you've afforded she hesitated. "Them. Let them feel threatened," Kalen growled. "They will fall in line." "It's more than that," Marissa pressed, handing him a tablet. "We've intercepted communications. There's a faction, led by an elder named Gregor, who is actively petitioning for Alara's family to be stripped of their new status. He's calling her an opportunist, a gold digger who trapped you. He's arguing that the pup, born of an Omega, will dilute the Silver Moon bloodline. Rage, cold and absolute, poured from Kaelin. It was a tangible force, a wave of killing intent that washed over me through the bond, making me feel sick. He dares. Kaelin whispered, his voice dangerously soft. He is stirring up old prejudices, Marissa said. He's using Alara's rank against her, against you. He has allies. And, she paused, taking a breath. We believe he may have reached out to the Volkovs. The name hung in the air like a death sentence. This wasn't just pack politics anymore. This was treason. An internal threat colluding with an external enemy. Kaelin was terrifyingly still. The air around him seemed to drop in temperature. Find him, he commanded, his voice a low, lethal promise of violence. Bring him to me. Marissa bowed her head. Alpha. She turned to leave but paused at the door. Her cold eyes met mine, and for the first time I saw something other than professional disdain in them. It was a flicker of pity? Or perhaps a warning. The moment she was gone, I turned to Kaelin. This is my fault. My family. This is not your fault, he cut me off, his voice raw. He began to pace, the barely contained violence rolling off him in waves. This is a challenge to my authority. Gregor is using you as a weapon against me. He stopped and looked at me, his eyes blazing. And that is a mistake he will only make once. What are you going to do? I asked, my blood running cold. I knew the old pack laws. A challenge like this, an act of treason. The punishment was death. I am going to handle it, he said, his face a mask of stone. That night I couldn't sleep. I could feel his rage through the bond, a constant, simmering inferno. He didn't come to bed. I found him in his office downstairs, the room lit only by the city lights beyond the massive window. He was standing there, a dark silhouette against the glittering skyline. You can't kill him, I whispered from the doorway. He turned slowly. He threatens my mate and my heir. The law is clear. The law is brutal, I countered, walking into the room. And it will make you a martyr in the eyes of his supporters. It will prove their point that you are a tyrant ruled by your new Omega mate. It will create a rift in your pack that the Volkovs will tear wide open. What is your alternative? He snarled. Allow him to undermine me? To put you in danger? No, I said, stopping in front of him. You prove him wrong. You don't meet his challenge with brute force. You meet it with undeniable authority. I took a deep breath. Hold a formal hearing. In front of the entire pack. Let him voice his accusations. And let me answer them. He stared at me, shocked. Absolutely not. I will not subject you to that kind of public humiliation. It won't be a humiliation, I insisted, my voice gaining strength. It will be a demonstration. They see an Omega. A weakling. A gold digger. Let them see the mate of their alpha. Let them see the mother of their future leader. Let me face him. Let me show them that this bond is real. Let me fight for my place. For our pup's place. He searched my face, a war raging in his eyes. The protective alpha wanted to lock me away and eliminate the threat. But the strategist, the leader, saw the wisdom in my words. He saw the power in the unexpected. It's a risk, he said, his voice rough. It's our only move, I replied. Trust me, Kaelin. He looked from my face to my stomach, then back again. A long, tense silence stretched between us. Finally he gave a single sharp nod. So be it, he growled. But if they lay a hand on you, I will burn the entire world to the ground. Chapter 14. The Omega's Gambit. The pack assembly was held in a vast subterranean amphitheater beneath Vance Tower, a place reserved for the most solemn of occasions. The air was thick with tension and the combined scent of hundreds of shifters. They filled the tiered stone benches, their faces a sea of curiosity, hostility, and suspicion. This was not my pack. I was an outsider, an interloper, and they were here to see me torn apart. I walked beside Kaelin, his hand a solid, reassuring weight on the small of my back. I wore a simple dark blue dress, a color of quiet authority. My hair was down, a statement that I was not a doll to be presented, but a wolf in my own right. The bond between us was a tight, humming wire. I could feel Kaelin's rage, a tightly leashed beast straining for release, but beneath it I could also feel his faith in me. It was a fragile, terrifying, and exhilarating thing. We took our places on a raised dais at the center of the amphitheater. Across from us stood Gregor, the dissenting elder. He was a large, powerfully built wolf, his face a roadmap of old scars and his scent thick with smug self-righteousness. He believed he had already won. Alpha Kalen, Gregor began, his voice booming through the silent chamber. We are here today to address a grave threat to the purity and stability of the Silver Moon Syndicate. You have taken an Omega as a mate, a wolf of no standing, and elevated her family above those who have bled for this pack for generations. You have been ensnared, bewitched by a calculating female who now carries a pup that threatens to dilute our sacred Alpha bloodline. A murmur of agreement rippled through a faction of the crowd. Kalen's jaw clenched, a low growl rumbling in his chest, but he held his ground, his eyes fixed on me, giving me the floor. I stepped forward. All eyes swung to me. The weight of their combined animosity was a physical force, trying to crush me, to force me into a submissive Omega posture. I fought it, planting my feet, lifting my chin. My name is Alara Vance, I said, my voice clear and steady, amplified by the chamber's acoustics. I was of the Blackwood Creek pack. I am an Omega. Everything Elder Gregor has said on these points is true. A wave of shock rippled through the assembly. They had expected denials, excuses. I had given them agreement. Gregor himself looked momentarily thrown. But he is wrong to call me a threat, I continued, my gaze sweeping the crowd, meeting the eyes of the hostile, the curious, the doubtful. He is wrong to question the wisdom of your Alpha. And he is grievously wrong to question the legitimacy of his heir. I turn my full attention to Gregor. You speak of bloodlines and purity. You see my rank as a weakness. But you have forgotten the heart of a pack. A pack is not just its alphas. A pack is a body. The alphas are the mind, the strategists. The betas are the muscle, the warriors. And the omegas? We are the heart. We are the nurturers, the healers, the glue that binds the pack together in times of peace and mends it after times of war. To dismiss the heart is to create a body with no soul. I took a step closer to the edge of the dais. Your Alpha did not choose me because he was bewitched. He chose me because our pup, the future of this pack, chose me. The bond between us was not a calculation. It was fate. A fate that has brought together the mind and the heart of this pack in a union that will make it stronger than ever before. I placed a hand on my stomach, a simple maternal gesture that was more powerful than any weapon. You look at me and see an Omega. But I am the mother of your next Alpha. This pup I carry is not a dilution. It is a synthesis. It will have its father's strength, his strategic mind, his unyielding will. And it will have my heart. It will know compassion. It will know how to heal as well as how to fight. It will be the most powerful leader this pack has ever known. My voice rang with a conviction I didn't know I possessed. The words poured out of me, born from a fierce maternal love and the undeniable truth of the bond. I turned my back on Gregor, a deliberate, dismissive act, and faced the crowd. I did not ask for this. I did not scheme for this. But I will not apologize for it. I am Kalen Vance's mate. And I will stand by his side and I will raise his heir and I will be the heart that this pack needs. Anyone who sees that as a threat is not a threat to me. They are a threat to the future of the Silver Moon Syndicate. Silence. Absolute, stunned silence. No one had ever seen an Omega speak with such fire, such authority. I had not challenged Gregor's facts, but I had completely reframed them. I had turned his argument of weakness into one of unique, undeniable strength. Then a single sound broke the silence. An elder she-wolf, one of the two on the council, began to clap. Slowly, rhythmically. Then another joined her. And another. Soon the entire amphitheater was filled with a thunderous applause that shook the very stones. They were not just clapping for me, they were reaffirming their loyalty to their Alpha, a loyalty I had just handed back to him stronger than ever. Gregor's face was a mask of disbelief and fury. He had been outmaneuvered, defeated not by force but by words. By the heart. Kalen came to stand beside me, his golden eyes blazing with a fierce, possessive pride that was so intense it made me dizzy. He wrapped his arm around my waist, pulling me against him, a silent, powerful statement to his entire pack. He leaned down, his lips brushing against my ear, his voice a low, intimate growl meant only for me. "My magnificent mate," he whispered. "You were born to be a queen." Chapter 15. The Scent of Betrayal. The victory in the amphitheater was a turning point. I was no longer the scandalous secret, the Omega interloper. I was Alara Vance, the Alpha's mate, a she-wolf who had faced down an elder and won the respect of the pack. The hostility in the eyes of the Silvermoon members was replaced by a grudging, and in some cases genuine, acceptance. The truce between Kaelin and me had been forged into a true alliance. Our nights were no longer filled with a tense, unspoken distance. He started sleeping in the master suite in the same bed. At first he kept to his side, a respectful but charged space between us. But the bond, coupled with the memory of our first night, was a relentless tide. One night I woke from another nightmare and he was there, pulling me into his arms, his solid warmth a shield against the ghosts of my past. It became our new normal. We didn't speak of it, but the quiet intimacy of sharing a bed, of seeking comfort in each other's arms in the dark, was a more profound confession than words could ever be. Our days were filled with a surprising partnership. He began bringing me into his office, not as a spectator but as a participant. He'd run strategies by me, value my perspective. I learned the ruthless world of his business, the intricate dance of power and politics. In turn, I taught him about the heart of his pack, the needs of the families, the whispers of unrest, the small things a leader from his lofty height might miss. We were becoming a team. One afternoon he was on a conference call, his voice a low, commanding rumble as he negotiated a hostile takeover. I was curled on the sofa in his office, reading a book on early childhood development for shifters. The bond was a calm, steady river between us, a comfortable backdrop to our separate tasks. Suddenly, a sharp, ugly spike of pure venom shot through our connection. It was so unexpected, so jarring it made me drop my book. I looked up. Kaelin had frozen mid-sentence, his knuckles white where he gripped his phone. His eyes were narrowed, fixed on something outside the room. "I'll call you back," he snarled into the phone, ending the call. "What is it?" I asked, getting to my feet, my own senses on high alert. He didn't answer. He strode to the door and flung it open. Marissa stood on the other side, her hand raised as if to knock. Beside her stood a nervous-looking beta in a security uniform. "What is the meaning of this?" Kaelin demanded, his voice dangerously low. The security guard flinched. "Alpha, my apologies for the intrusion. But there was a package delivered for the Luna." He used my new formal title. "It bypassed our standard security protocols. We don't know how it got into the building." A cold dread washed over me. Kaelin's entire focus narrowed on the guard. "Where is it?" "Forensics is examining it now, Alpha. It was left outside the penthouse service entrance." A package that had gotten through Kaelin's ironclad security, left at my door. Cassandra Volkov's words echoed in my mind. "They always go for the weak spot." "But that's not all, Alpha," the guard stammered, his scent thick with fear. "The man who delivered it, we have him on security footage. He used a stolen keycard, but we recognized him." He swallowed hard. "It was one of ours. A Delta from the West Quadrant Patrol. One of his own men. A traitor within the walls." Kaelin was unervingly calm. It was the calm of a storm's eye, the terrifying stillness before the world is torn apart. "And the scent on the package?" he asked, his voice soft, lethal. The guard's eyes flickered to me, then back to his Alpha. It was faint, but unmistakable. It was scented with wolfsbane. My blood ran cold. Wolfsbane. A poison lethal to shifters and especially dangerous to pregnant females. It could terminate a pregnancy or worse, cause a pup to be born deformed, broken. But it was what Kaelin did next that truly terrified me. He turned his head slowly and looked at Marissa. His second in command. The one person he trusted above all others. He didn't say a word. He just inhaled, his nostrils flaring. And through the bond I felt what he scented. On her. Faint, almost undetectable, masked by her professional, controlled scent. But it was there. The faintest, lingering trace of wolfsbane. The bond between us erupted in a cataclysm of pure, undiluted rage and a soul-shattering agony. It wasn't just the anger of an Alpha whose mate had been threatened. It was the devastating, heart-wrenching pain of betrayal from the one person he had trusted to protect us. The serpent had not been outside the gates. It had been coiled right at the heart of his home. Chapter 16. The Traitor's Confession. The silence in the corridor was a living entity, thick with a horror that was colder and sharper than any rage. The security guard, sensing the catastrophic shift in the atmosphere, took a half step back, his eyes wide with terror. He didn't understand what he was witnessing, but his wolf knew it was standing on the edge of an abyss. Marissa's face, always a mask of cool composure, finally cracked. Her skin went ashen. Her professional scent, usually so controlled, became acrid with pure, unadulterated fear. He knew. She knew that he knew. Kalen didn't move. He didn't roar. He didn't lash out. He just stood there, his golden eyes locked on the woman he had trusted with his life, his pack, and now with my life and the life of his heir. The pain that radiated from him through the bond was a physical agony. It was a clean, deep wound, a blade of betrayal sliding between his ribs. It was the echo of the ambush that had taken his family, the same sickening shock of discovering a serpent where he had expected loyalty. "Why?" he asked. The word was not a roar of command. It was a whisper of raw, broken disbelief. Marissa's composure shattered completely. A choked sob escaped her lips. "Of it. I can explain." "Can you?" he countered, his voice still dangerously quiet. He took a step towards her and she flinched as if he had struck her. "Can you explain why the scent of a poison meant for my mate, for my pup, is on you? Can you explain how a traitor from my own pack bypassed security protocols that you designed?" "It wasn't meant to harm her," she cried, her voice cracking. "I swear. It was a warning. It was only a warning." The confession, desperate and damning, hung in the air. The security guard's jaw dropped. My own hand flew to my stomach, a primal, protective gesture. "A warning." Kalen's voice dropped even lower, becoming a lethal rumble that vibrated through the floor. "Warn me of what, Marissa? That my own beta would conspire with my enemies?" "No. Not with the Volkovs," she insisted, shaking her head frantically. "Gregor, he came to me. He and his faction. They were afraid. They saw her." Her eyes flickered to me with a fresh wave of resentment, and they saw weakness. They saw an Omega who would soften you, who would dilute the bloodline, who would make the pack vulnerable. They thought they were being loyal. "And you agreed with them," Kalen stated, the accusation flat and final. Tears streamed down Marissa's face. "I have served you and your father before you my entire life. I have dedicated everything to the strength of this pack. And I saw him. I saw Kalen Vance, the most powerful alpha in a century, brought to his knees by an Omega's scent. I saw him making decisions based on feeling. It was a threat. I thought if I could scare her, if I could make it seem like an outside threat, she would retreat. She would hide. She would remove herself as a distraction so you could focus on the real enemies, on the Volkovs." Her twisted logic was laid bare. In her eyes, she was the loyal soldier, performing a painful but necessary surgery to cut out a cancer she perceived in her pack's heart. "He saw me not as a person but as a disease. You conspired with Gregor. You used a Silver Moon Delta to plant the package. You scented it yourself to make it seem authentic, never imagining I would scent it on you." Kalen pieced it together, his voice devoid of all emotion. It was the voice of a judge pronouncing a sentence. "I never would have let it touch her," Marissa whispered, her face crumbling. "It was just meant to be found. To create fear. To make you see reason." "Reason," Kalen repeated the word as if it were a foreign object in his mouth. He finally moved, closing the distance between them. He didn't touch her. He just looked down at her, his immense height and power a crushing weight. "The bond between us was a screaming inferno of pain and righteous fury. You dared to threaten my mate. You used my own pack against me. You broke the most sacred law we have, loyalty to the Alpha, to the pack, to the Luna." He turned to the petrified security guard. "Take her to the cells. She is to be held for treason. Gregor and every shifter involved in this conspiracy are to be apprehended immediately. No one is to speak to them. No one is to touch them. Await my judgment." The guard, trembling, finally snapped to attention. "Alpha." He reached for Marissa's arm. She didn't resist. She just stared at Kalen, her face a mask of utter despair and ruin. "Kalen," she pleaded, using his name for the first and last time. "Please." He turned his back on her, a final, absolute dismissal. He walked back into the office towards me, his face carved from stone. He didn't stop until he was standing in front of me, his hands coming up to cup my face, his thumbs gently stroking my cheeks. His eyes searched mine, filled with a raw, agonizing apology. "I am sorry," he breathed, the words torn from the depths of his soul. "I brought this into your life. I failed to protect you." "You didn't fail," I whispered, placing my hands over his. "We found them. Together." He leaned his forehead against mine, his eyes squeezing shut. The pain and betrayal still raged through the bond, but now, it was mingled with a fierce, desperate love. It was a love that had been tested by fire, a love that had seen the serpent in the garden and had not faltered. He had lost his family to betrayal once before. This time he would not lose us. I could feel the vow solidifying in his soul, a promise of absolute, merciless protection that was more terrifying and more comforting than anything I had ever known. Chapter 17. Judgment and Mercy. The judgment was held 2 days later in the same subterranean amphitheater. This time the mood was not one of hostile curiosity, but of grim, terrified solemnity. The entire pack was assembled, their sense a heavy cloud of fear and anticipation. On the central dais, Gregor, Marissa, and a dozen other shifters stood in chains, their heads bowed. They were the traitors, their conspiracy laid bare for all to see. Kalen sat on the Alpha's stone throne, me on a slightly smaller but equal throne beside him. His hand rested on mine, a silent, constant connection. He was the picture of cold, implacable authority. His face was unreadable, but I could feel the maelstrom of emotions roiling beneath the surface through our bond. The lingering pain of Marissa's betrayal, the cold fury of a leader whose trust had been violated, and the heavy weight of the decision he had to make. The pack law was absolute. Treason, especially treason that endangered the Alpha's mate and heir, was punishable by death. There were no exceptions. The pack expected blood. Kalen stood, and a wave of silence washed over the assembly. "You have heard the charges." His voice boomed, imbued with Alpha power. "You have seen the evidence. A plot to instill fear in my mate, to undermine my authority, to create chaos within my pack. A plot that used poison as its threat and betrayal as its weapon." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the chained conspirators. "The law is clear. The penalty is death." A shiver of grim satisfaction went through the crowd. Justice would be served. Gregor lifted his head, a look of fatalistic defiance on his face. Marissa just squeezed her eyes shut, a single tear tracing a path through the dirt on her cheek. Kalen's eyes met mine. We had not spoken of what he would do. He had locked himself away for a day, wrestling with his duty and his conscience. I did not know what he had decided. I had only offered him my trust. "The law is clear," Kalen repeated, his voice dropping slightly. "But a law without wisdom is just a weapon. And a leader who rules only with weapons is a tyrant." He turned his gaze back to the crowd. "Elder Gregor has forgotten the heart of this pack. In his fear he sought to poison it. For this he can no longer be a part of it. He and his direct conspirators are hereby exiled. They will be stripped of the Silver Moon mark and cast out, to survive in the Lone Lands if they can. Their assets will be seized and used to create a new fund for the protection and education of the pack's pups." A gasp of shock went through the assembly. Exile was a fate many considered worse than death. But it was not death. It was a surprising and for some an unsatisfying act of mercy. Gregor's face went white with horror. Then Kalen's gaze fell on Marissa. The entire amphitheater held its breath. She was his beta, his right hand. Her betrayal was the deepest, the most personal. "Marissa," he said, his voice laced with a profound, weary sadness. "You have served this pack your entire life. In your loyalty you became blind. You saw a threat where there was none, and in your attempt to protect me, you committed the ultimate betrayal." He walked down from the dais until he stood before her. The chains clinked as she trembled. "I cannot forgive what you have done," he said, his voice so quiet only those nearby could hear, but the sentiment echoed through the bond to every member of the pack. "The trust between us is broken. You can no longer serve as my beta." He paused, and I felt the weight of his decision. "But I will not cast you out. I will not take your life." He looked back at the pack. "Her punishment will be to serve. She will be stripped of her rank and assigned to oversee the new community initiatives on the Eastern Docks. She will work with the Omega Healers. She will spend her days mending the very families she once saw as insignificant. She will learn the meaning of the heart of this pack from the ground up. She will learn what true strength is. And perhaps one day she will earn back a fraction of the honor she has lost. It was a brilliant move. A judgment of profound wisdom and startling mercy. He had not shown weakness. He had shown a new kind of strength. He had not just punished the traitors. He had used their crime to reinforce the very values they had attacked. He had honored my Omega perspective, my plea for a pack with a soul, and had made it law. As the guards led the condemned away, a new feeling rose from the assembled pack. The fear was gone, replaced by a deep, resonant wave of respect. It was a respect born not of fear but of awe. They were seeing their alpha not just as a warrior but as a king. Kalen returned to my side, his hand finding mine again. The bond between us was calm, clear, and filled with a quiet, powerful light. He had faced the greatest test of his leadership, the deepest wound to his soul, and had emerged not broken but remade. He leaned over, his lips brushing my temple. "A new era for the Silver Moon," he murmured for my ears only. And I knew in that moment that our reign had just begun. Chapter 18. The Volkov Gambit. The aftermath of the judgment settled into a period of unexpected peace. Kalen's decisive but merciful actions had solidified his rule, quelling any internal dissent. The pack, now unified behind him and his new vision, thrived. Our alliance, forged in crisis, deepened into a true partnership. Our days were a blend of pack business and quiet domesticity, our nights a journey of discovery as we explored the depths of our bond and the growing intimacy between us. The fear of outside threats lessened, but it never vanished. Kalen's security was now a silent, omnipresent force, and he rarely let me leave the tower without him. He was a doting, fiercely protective mate, his hand almost always resting on my growing belly, a constant connection to the pup within. He would talk to the baby, his deep voice a low rumble against my skin, telling it about the world it would one day help to lead. In these moments, seeing the ruthless alpha transformed into a tender, expectant father, my heart would ache with a love so fierce it felt like it could reshape the world. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. Kalen was in a meeting and I was in the penthouse nursery, a room now filled with soft blankets and handcrafted wooden toys, when his voice, sharp and urgent, echoed in my mind through the bond. "Alara, stay in the penthouse. Lock the doors. Do not let anyone in until I get there." Terror, cold and sharp, lanced through me. "Kalen, what is it? What's wrong?" "It's Cassandra Volkov," he sent back, his mental voice tight with controlled fury. "She's requested a parley. An emergency meeting. She's invoking the old truce laws. She's coming to the tower. Alone." My blood ran cold. A parley. Alone. It was a bold, reckless move. "What does she want?" I whispered aloud, my hand pressed to my stomach. "I don't know," he replied, his presence already moving rapidly through the building towards me. "But it's a trap. Has to be." When he burst into the penthouse moments later, his face was a grim mask. "She's on her way up," he said, his eyes scanning the room as if expecting an attack at any moment. "You can't meet with her alone," I said, my voice trembling. "Under the truce laws I have to," he growled. "But I will not do it in my office. We will meet here. In our home. Where you are." She wanted to isolate me. Instead, she will face us both. It was a brilliant countermove. She expected to face the ruthless alpha in his seat of power. Instead, she would face the mated pair in their den, a far more primal and unpredictable battlefield. When the elevator chimed, Kalen positioned himself in front of me, his body a solid shield. The doors opened and Cassandra Volkov stepped out. She was dressed in a blood-red dress, a stark slash of color against the penthouse's serene white. She looked as sleek and dangerous as ever, but her scent was off. Beneath the spicy perfume, there was a faint, almost undetectable tang of fear. "Kalen," she said, her voice a low purr, though it lacked its usual confidence. Her eyes flicked to me, her gaze lingering on my swollen belly before returning to him. "And the little mother. How cozy." "State your purpose, Cassandra," Kalen said, his voice flat. "My patience is thin." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "My father has made a move. A final one. He has consolidated his power and he has made an alliance with the Eastern Pacts. He believes the Silver Moon is weakened, distracted by your domestic situation. Your father is a fool," Kaelin snarled. Yes, Cassandra agreed, the single word shocking in its sincerity. He is. He is old world. He believes in brute force. He is going to launch an all-out attack on your shipping routes tonight. He thinks it will be a swift victory that will cripple you. I stared at her, confused. Why was she telling us this? This was treason against her own pack. And why are you here, betraying your own alpha? Kaelin asked, his voice laced with suspicion. Cassandra's mask of cool arrogance finally fell away, revealing a flicker of raw desperation beneath. Because my father is a dinosaur. His way is the way of endless war, of bloodshed that gains nothing. He sees your omega mate as a weakness. I see her, she looked at me, a new, grudging respect in her eyes, as your greatest strength. You didn't kill Gregor. You showed mercy. You invested in the community. You are building a new kind of power, one that doesn't just rely on fear. My father's world is ending, Kaelin. I want to be on the winning side of the new one. She took a step forward. I don't want a war that will destroy both our packs. I want an alliance. I am my father's heir. But he has other more loyal sons. If you crush his attack tonight, he will be weakened. Humiliated. That is when I will make my move to usurp him. But I cannot do it without your help. I need your guarantee that when I take control of the Volkov pack, the Silver Moon will recognize my authority and agree to a lasting peace. It was an audacious, breathtaking gamble. She was offering us victory, offering us peace, all in exchange for helping her commit patricide and seize control of her own pack. She was a serpent, yes, but she was a serpent who wanted to rule the garden, not burn it to the ground. Kaelin stared at her, the strategist in him instantly processing the 1,000 variables of her proposal. I could feel his mind racing through the bond. It was a trap. It was an opportunity. It was both. He looked at me, a silent question in his eyes. He was no longer making decisions alone. He was asking for my counsel. I thought of the future, of our pup being born into a world of endless war. And I thought of the strange, fierce respect I saw in Cassandra's eyes. She was a predator, but she was a predator who understood that a thriving ecosystem was better than a barren wasteland. I gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. Kaelin turned back to Cassandra, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across his face. Tell me your plan, he said. Chapter 19. The Birth of a King. The night was a symphony of controlled chaos. While Kaelin's warriors, armed with Cassandra's intelligence, moved to intercept and neutralize the Volkov attack at the docks, a different, more primal battle was beginning in the penthouse. The first contraction hit me just as Kaelin was leaving, a sharp, clenching fist deep in my womb. I gasped, my hand flying to my belly. He was at my side in an instant, his face pale with a terror that dwarfed anything he felt for the impending battle. It's too soon, he breathed, his eyes wide. The pup has decided it's time, I gasped, leaning against him as another wave crashed through me. The pack healer was summoned. The penthouse, once a sterile symbol of power, was transformed into a birthing room. The sense of antiseptic and fear mingled with the rich, earthy scent of impending life. Kaelin never left my side. He was my anchor in a storm of pain, his hand gripping mine, his calm strength flowing into me through the bond. He fed me his energy, whispering words of encouragement, his voice a low, steady rumble that was the only thing I could focus on. The labor was long and arduous. It was a raw, primal struggle, stripping away everything but the essential truth of instinct and endurance. In the deepest, darkest moments, when the pain threatened to swallow me whole, he was there. He would press his forehead to mine, his golden eyes locked with mine, and through the bond he would share the pain, taking a piece of it into himself, a silent, selfless act of a true mate. The world narrowed to the space between us, to the rhythm of our breathing, to the life that was fighting its way into the world. And then with one final tearing cry that was both mine and his, our son was born. He was a perfect, beautiful creature, with a shock of dark hair like his father's and a lusty, furious cry that filled the room. The healer cleaned him and placed him in my arms. The moment his tiny, warm body settled against my skin, the world righted itself. The pain, the fear, the struggles of the past months, it all faded into insignificance. There was only him. Our pup. Our son. Tears streamed down my face as I looked at him. He quieted, his impossibly tiny fingers wrapping around one of mine. I looked up at Kaelin. He was on his knees beside the bed, his face a mask of utter, unguarded awe. Tears tracked down his own cheeks, the first I had ever seen him shed. He reached out a trembling hand, his finger gently stroking the pup's soft cheek. "Leo," he whispered, his voice thick with an emotion so profound it made my own heart ache. "Lion. Our little king." At that moment the bond between us flared, brighter and stronger than it had ever been. It was no longer just a connection of fate or passion. It was now cemented by a shared creation, a shared love so powerful it felt like the center of the universe. He was mine. I was his. And this tiny, perfect creature was ours. Later, as dawn painted the sky in shades of rose and gold, Kalen's phone buzzed. It was a message from his warriors at the docks. He read it, a slow, satisfied smile spreading across his face. "It's done," he said, looking at me, his eyes shining. "The attack was crushed. The Volkovs are in disarray. Your gambit paid off." He paused. "Our gambit." A few hours later, another message arrived. This one was from an unknown number. It contained only 3 words. "The serpent reigns." Cassandra had succeeded. A new era of peace, brokered by 2 she-wolves from opposite sides of a war, was about to begin. Kalen put the phone down and came to sit on the edge of the bed. He wrapped his arms around me and our son, pulling us into a gentle embrace. We were a family. Forged in secrets and lies, tested by betrayal and war, but a family nonetheless. "I love you, Ilara," he whispered against my hair, the words I never thought I'd hear spoken with such simple, profound sincerity. "You and Leo, you are my world. My heart." "I love you too," I cried softly, my heart so full it felt like it would burst. He pulled back, his golden eyes searching mine, filled with a love that chased away every last shadow. "It seems," he murmured, a hint of his old arrogant smirk returning, but now tempered with a deep, abiding love, that this Omega's solution was the most profitable merger I've ever made. I laughed through my tears, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy. He was right. It wasn't a takeover. It wasn't a transaction. It was the beginning of our empire, an empire built not just on power, but on a love that had conquered all. Chapter 20. The Alpha's Legacy. 5 years later. The annual Silver Moon Gala was no longer just a display of power. It was a celebration of community. The grand ballroom of Vance Tower was filled not just with the city's elite, but with the families of dockworkers, the healers from the new Pack Clinic and the teachers from the school Kalen had built. It was loud, vibrant, and filled with the scent of a pack that was not just strong but happy. I stood on a balcony, not the one where my life had changed but a new one, built off the family wing of the penthouse, watching the festivities below. The ivory silk of my dress was a familiar, comforting weight against my skin. A small, powerful body barreled into my legs, wrapping his arms around my knees. "Mama." I looked down into a pair of impossibly bright golden eyes. Leo, my son, my little king, grinned up at me, his face smeared with chocolate from a stolen cake. He had his father's looks, but his smile was all mine. "There you are, you little monster," I said, scooping him up into my arms. He giggled, his small hands patting my cheeks. He smelled of milk, chocolate, and the faint, unmistakable scent of a developing alpha. "Papa is looking for you," he said, pointing a sticky finger towards the ballroom doors. "Is he now?" I asked, nuzzling his neck. "And what does Papa want?" "He says he needs his queen," Leo said with all the solemnity a 5-year-old could muster. A pair of strong arms wrapped around me from behind, and a familiar, intoxicating scent of pine and ozone enveloped me. "He is correct," Kalen's deep voice rumbled against my ear. He pressed a kiss to my temple, his other hand coming to rest on our son's back. I leaned back against his solid chest, my heart full. The past 5 years had been a whirlwind of change. Under our joint leadership, the Silver Moon Syndicate had transformed. Our alliance with the Volkov Pack, led by a ruthless but fair Alpha Cassandra, had brought unprecedented peace and prosperity to the city. Marissa, having served her penance with a quiet, fierce dedication, had earned back a position of respect, now running the Pack's extensive charity network with an empathy no one knew she possessed. My family, secure and happy, were cherished elders in their own pack. But the greatest change had been in the man holding me. The cold, ruthless Alpha was still there, a merciless protector of his family and pack. But he was tempered now by a deep well of love and a quiet wisdom. He was a king who knew the value of his queen, A leader who understood that a pack's true strength lay in its heart. "What are you thinking about?" he murmured, his lips tracing a path down my neck to the faint, silvery scar of his mating mark. "I was thinking about how a single night can change everything," I whispered, turning in his arms to face him, Leo still nestled between us. How 2 pink lines on a plastic stick felt like a death sentence. His golden eyes softened, filled with the memory of our tumultuous beginning. "It wasn't a death sentence, my love," he said, his voice a low, intimate caress. "It was a coronation." He leaned in and kissed me, a slow, deep kiss filled with the comfortable passion of a love that had been tested by fire and had emerged unbreakable. It was a kiss that tasted of promises kept and a future that was bright and full of hope. Below us, the pack celebrated, a testament to the new world we had built. Leo squirmed in my arms, reaching for his father. Kalen took him, settling our son on his hip. The 2 most important males in my life, my alpha and my heir, stood beside me, their combined strength and love a shield around my heart. "My name is Alara Vance. I am an Omega. I am a Luna. And I learned that sometimes, the most terrifying moments of your life are not the end of your story, but the explosive, beautiful beginning of your legacy." My only hope had once been a Playboy alpha. Now he was my home. Think.